Chapter 16 to 19. February came quick. Izuku was making progress, very good progress. He was now able to use One for All at 7% of its total capacity, and he was steadily building himself a suitable reserve of chakra. It occurred to me that I've never actually written down anything that I discovered about chakra, how it's formed, how it's used, and that was problematic. If things keep progressing as they are now, in a couple of years Izuku may be able to use chakra as I do, and that makes me very happy. That is if he doesn't do something stupid like All Might. After my discoveries the day Izuku got his quirk, I went to work to find out why did All Might not discover chakra. After all, you need your own body's yin-yang energies to balance out whatever you draw from One for All's power bank, since that's what it is. A big ball of power that is grown through the growth of a person's chakra reserves. This is also the reason why All Might was the first to reach such power levels out of all of One for All's inheritors. Previously, One for All would boost the quirks of its recipients by injecting nature energy through their quirk factor and then into their 8 gates and only then their bodies, thusly diluting the nature energy with their own yin-yang energies and ensuring it didn't hurt them much. However, doing this meant that it didn't really get anything in return, and OFA's power bank was forced to grow on its own or with very little assistance. This is what made it easy for all the previous inheritors to wield it. That changed with All Might. Since he was quirkless, he had his own body's natural chakra nexus, and One for All latched onto that. This massive influx of energy enlarged his nexus, which then demanded that his body fill it up with its own energies that when combined with the natural energy coming from One for All boosted a person's physical capabilities even further, achieving a sort of artificial sage mode. As All Might continued to train both physically and mentally, his chakra reserves grew on their own, drawing more power from One for All, which in turn drew more power from the energy around him. This led to a vicious circle that enlarged both All Might's own chakra pool and One for All's nexus size at a tremendous rate. This ended with All Might's fight with All for One when he destroyed All Might's stomach. The physical damage was so great that his body could no longer replenish the same quantity of chakra that he was used to, and thusly his main nexus began to shrink and struggle to contain the energy flowing into it from One for All. This being said, you might be wondering, why did All Might not discover chakra as I know it? The answer is simple. That damned moron destroyed his chakra pathway system when he was learning to use One for All, thusly making him no more able to use chakra than Rock Lee. The first few uses, I'm told, were particularly devastating, making All Might tear his muscles apart and even breaking his bones. What's worse is that he continued to use it without checking to see why this was happening to him and why it didn't to the other users. The answer is simple: the other users had their quirk factor to take the brunt of the energy, and whatever physical boost came from using One for All was only secondary. All Might, however, used it as an offensive and defensive tool, and that wrecked the entire system of pathways in his body. I'm fortunate that I stopped Izuku from using this power without first preparing his own chakra pathways to handle it. I'm still worried. If he goes over his limit, then he too will wreck his chakra pathways and become unable to use ninjutsu. I made sure to imprint that onto him. I hope it sticks, but I'm not taking any chances. Now that he has the power, it seems that Izuku has grown somewhat moronic. Or it may be that his desire to help people was simply suppressed by his rational mind, knowing that he couldn't do anything even if he wanted to. Nowadays it's a different story. Izuku has made consistent and impressive progress in his use of chakra to boost his body's abilities, even if the deeper mysteries of chakra continue to elude him, and will probably continue to do so for years to come. This leads me neatly to the reason why I'm behaving like a psychotic obsessive stalker that has gone so far as to infiltrate the UA entrance exam. Seriously, crouching on the roof of UA with high-powered binoculars stuck to my face and wrapped in a cloak made for urban camouflage wasn't how I imagined I would spend the day before my graduation ceremony. I did manage to see Izuku's reunion with Katsuki, though it seemed that beside a glare Katsuki didn't even acknowledge Izuku's presence. Well, so long as he doesn't try to murder Izuku, everything will be fine. After all, I can't keep Izuku wrapped up in bubble wrap for the rest of his life. If he wants to be a hero, then he has to know how to get along with his more problematic colleagues without murdering them. I shook my head. This was not the time to dream about disemboweling Endeavor and strangling him with his own intestines, even if it would make so many of my headaches go away. That guy has become increasingly angrier over the last 6 months, and I think that it stems from some kind of one-sided rivalry with All Might. He's just pissed that All Might's retiring as the #1 hero and that he didn't get to take that title from him. And if I have a say in this, he won't get his title. Ever. The next few hours were boring, as that was when the written exam was happening, but they weren't unproductive. I sneaked into the storage bay for the robots that this year's UA entrance exam will use and imputed a slight modification into the 0-pointer. Izuku was too weak to take on one of those and win, all the while worrying about his fellow examinees. So, I ensured that my idiot little brother didn't encounter such a situation, and if he did and tried to blow it away with a full-strength punch from One for All, I would step in and disable his power. It will be painful and uncomfortable, but then again so would a broken arm and destroyed chakra pathways. I'm not a fool. I know that there is a distinct possibility that the government may want to brainwash Izuku to ensure his loyalty in the event that I go rouge. This is a good thing, in a way. A person with an active chakra system is neurologically more resilient than one without, and therefore less likely to be influenced by mind control quirks or devices. Also, I know that Izuku won't turn against me unless I do something truly unspeakably horrible. I have no such intentions since I do possess a moral compass. But the potential still remains that I could be the greatest threat to this nation should I turn rouge, and thusly Izuku will get the best food, the best trainers, and the rarest of opportunities to grow more and more powerful until he is a match for me. Izuku already knows what is required to beat me. I made certain of that. You may ask why I did this, and my answer is simple. If I discovered chakra, what's to stop others from discovering it as well? Or worse, what if an Otsutsuki shows up one day and I fall in battle? After all, I can't assume that the Narutoverse is all fiction now, can I? I already use their power with their knowledge, so there is a remote possibility that it exists in another reality. Enough of that. Now it's time to resume my obsessive stalking. God, I need help. I never imagined that I'll be reduced to a mere stalker when I have such vast resources of cheap robot minions, but what can you do? Family is family. The exam went on, and it seemed that my worries were unfounded. Izuku made short work of the robots in his area, and my backdoor in UA's computers tells me that he has the highest villain point, beating Katsuki by 10, and the highest rescue points so far. After all, you can't really trust a machine to judge what makes a good rescue and award points based on that judgment. It's also a method of screening the students to see which ones are all talk and which ones actually deserve to be a hero. I make my way stealthily through the corridors of UA when I receive a phone call from Aizawa. "Hello, Sensei, how can I help you?" I said, or more like typed. Special software would translate that into speech for me. "You can get your ass to the observation room, problem child." "I know that you're in the building," said Aizawa. This brought me up short. He knew. That's supposed to be impossible, no, improbable, more like it. Perhaps Nizu had some spyware embedded into my gear and computers. "I'll check." I body flickered to the room in question and entered without knocking. Aizawa was unsurprised to see me so soon. I entered the darkly lit room filled. Almost every teacher from UA was here, looking at the wall of screens and taking notes on what they were seeing. "So, why did you want me here?" I asked again. "We wouldn't put it past you to meddle in the exam, problem child. This is just insurance against that," said Aizawa. My face remained carefully blank as I arched an eyebrow at him. "Do you truly think so lowly of me?" I asked with mock hurt. "Yes," he replied without hesitation. "Ha, you know me so well, Sensei, but what I'm doing isn't so much cheating as it is ensuring that Izuku doesn't hurt himself," I said. This drew the attention of the other teachers. I could sense that they were curious, but they were trying to be stealthy. Not that it worked. Aizawa's face hardened. "Will it be a problem?" he asked. I shook my head. So long as he doesn't try to push himself too much in one go, he should be fine. In a couple of years, he'll have his full power at his disposal, but until then he's limited to low percentages of that power. If he overdose it, he could become crippled for life and be unable to access higher levels of power later on, I said. The other teachers don't know about OFA and would assume that Izuku got a slightly worse off version of my own power. I need them to be aware not to push Izuku too much. My little brother may be smart, but he is lacking in common sense. I turn my attention to the wall of monitors, and immediately a few candidates catch my attention. A kid with engines coming out of his calves. Must be an Ida then. He seems to be doing fine, though his technique is strangely lacking. One would expect this kid to be a near master in Taekwondo in order to make full use of his quirk's combative advantages. Another one that caught my eye was a kid with a tail. I can immediately tell that one's a martial artist. It's a shame that his quirk prohibits him from entering in any sort of competition worth mentioning. Finally, I turn my attention to Katsuki. His battle instinct is impressive. "That kid is quite something," said Aizawa, as if reading my thoughts. "He is, in a certain sense. Though I worry what will happen if his worldview is too damaged by outside forces, I said. I sensed Aizawa stiffen next to me. He got my message then. Good. He will need to watch Katsuki closely to ensure that he doesn't become a loose cannon. Otherwise, Katsuki may just come across an accident. While not commonly known, the Hero Commission keeps a close watch on its elite heroes. It does this because those are usually the most powerful people in the country, even besting the military's quirked Special Forces unit. If there is even the slightest chance that one of those heroes might fly off the rails and become a warlord, then certain specialized task groups will take care of that person, either by outright murder or by crippling them enough that they can no longer work or pose a threat. That is the fate that awaits anyone that is deemed a threat to the continued existence of the world as we know it. Thankfully, though these task groups work in the shadows, so they don't really interact with the underground world of crime. It is one of the reasons why I was so careful in the beginning when I had just unlocked Chakra. I can't put it past the Hero Commission to kidnap and brainwash children and mold them into their personal attack dogs. Hey, look at this kid, he's about to take on the zero-pointer, yelled someone. My head snapped to the screen so fast that it nearly gave me whiplash. In an instant my Sharingan was activated and I watched as Izuku charged full tilt at a zero-pointer. A zero-pointer that was about to squash a girl. God damn it, Izuku, you had one fucking job and even this you fail. I prepared. Chakra was sent screaming throughout my entire body as it was changed into its lightning nature state. Blue sparks flew across my skin, in a way eerily familiar to Izuku's full cowl. The teachers could feel the power that was building up inside of me, of this I had no doubt. I readied for a substitution in case I needed to evacuate an examinee from the danger zone. I watched with bated breath as Izuku reached the zero-pointer, but instead of a giant flare of energy that I was expecting, Izuku's power remained relatively constant as he hurtled towards the girl. With my Sharingan I could see him picking her up before kicking it up a notch and speeding out of there in a flash of green lightning. I released a breath I didn't know I was holding as I powered down. A few moments later the horn sounded, and the exam ended. I left without a word. Half an hour later I was waiting for Izuku outside the gates of UA with a chauffeur-driven car. What? All Might's handing me Might Tower and all his agency's assets anyways, might as well make some use of the corporate car fleet. I was dressed in a white form-fitting hoodie and black pants. On my right I had my latest masterpiece. My sword. It was a straight single-edged short sword ideal for close-quarters combat. It was linked to my belt by a length of chain that was connected to its sheath, leaving it to dangle along my right leg right flank. All in all, I looked like a badass and by the looks the girls were giving me as I sat on the hood of the Rolls Royce I came in I can quite definitely say that I'm also hot. When Izuku came out of UA, you could say that the difference between the two of us were those of night and day. Izuku looked like a kid. A cute kid at that, while I looked like a young adult. Especially the hair, I'll never understand how Izuku can stand to have such long and messy hair. So, how'd it go? I asked once I came to a stop next to him. Gee good, can we leave? Asked Izuku quite pathetically. I looked around, and it seemed that we've drawn quite a crowd. To my enhanced senses I could hear the whispers of, "Who is this kid?" that were going around. Sure, I brought the car, I said with a smile. If it was possible, Izuku became even more horrified when he saw that I brought the most expensive car I could find in the garage under Might Tower. I didn't let Izuku to recover as I shoved him in the car, before removing my sword and going in the car myself. Once the door closed, I turned to Izuku with a shit-eating grin on my face. So how was the exam? I asked as we set off. How was the exam? That's what you asked me. Why did you make such a commotion, Nii-san? Asked Izuku. I raised an eyebrow. The moment you speak your last name, people all over the country will know that you're related to me, so why hide it? Especially when it comes with such benefits, I said motioning at the car. I don't want to be known as the rich kid, mumbled Izuku. Ah, I see. He didn't want to get ostracized because of his difference in status. Don't worry, that won't happen. So how did you do? I asked. This seemed to cheer him up. I did great. I got 88 villain points, said Izuku. The highest of them all, I confirmed. This stopped Izuku short. Even higher than Dash, he began asking. By 10, I replied. The car lapsed into silence. You know what, let's go and pick up All Might from the office and have a celebratory dinner, I said. Izuku immediately brightened up at the thought of All Might. Sure. Normally there was a week of delay between taking the exams and receiving the results. Thankfully, me being me saved Izuku the trouble of worrying if he made it or not. This allowed us to focus all our energy tackling a very big problem. Ah, fuck. This is impossible. How the fucking hell are we supposed to fold 3-dimensional spacetime into a 2-dimensional space, yelled Izuku. It may surprise you to know, but Izuku can get really foul-mouthed when he's angry. Honestly, I blame it on all the time he spent with Katsuki. Oi, language, you little fucker. I told you this shit ain't easy, so sit your sorry ass down and run over those equations again. There must be something that we missed, I yelled back. Okay, so it may be a small case of the pot calling the kettle black, but in my defense I happen to come pre-packaged with 3 decades worth of life experience. Now, you might be wondering what it is we're doing here, and to that I will answer with just one word. Fuinjutsu. So far in my experiments I discovered that when in certain situations, chakra works just like a qubit. That's what is used to describe bits of information in a quantum computer, a quantum bit if you will. So, in theory it means that chakra has the ability to both store and transmit information, not something very hard to deduce. The trick is finding a link between this and the Fuinjutsu that I know of when a revelation struck me. I don't need to. Since the beginning I researched chakra completely independent from any kind of preconceptions about its mechanics. Oh, sure, I knew about its different effects, but the methods I used to attain these effects are fundamentally different than those from the Narratoverse. For example, in the Narratoverse, if someone wanted to learn a jutsu, all they would need to do is memorize the hand signs, have a basic understanding of what the effect of the jutsu will be, have the necessary power and chakra control, and they would be able to perform that jutsu in a few tries. It would not be perfect, but it would suffice. This obviously excludes the more complicated jutsu, but for the average chunin and jonin, this was how it was done. This is how the Sharingan can copy jutsu. This was how Naruto learned his signature shadow clone jutsu. My jutsu are fundamentally different. They can't be used in this plug-and-play style because the method those effects are created with is different from the one used in the Narratoverse. What I did was use hand signs to focus and direct the flow of chakra that has already been changed into its corresponding nature and power output for the desired effect. This has a side bonus of requiring relatively few hand signs compared to their Narratoverse equivalents. In a way you could say that this was the logical way to create jutsu and was in all likelihood how Hagoromo used jutsu-like abilities. Knowing this I can only respect Indra Otsutsuki even more, because he didn't only manage to create jutsu for himself, but established the basics for a universal system of jutsu that remained standing for more than 1,000 years and was so good that no one ever thought of using a different system. With this in mind, Fuinjutsu should be treated much the same, so I roped Izuku into helping me. I need his in-depth understanding and expertise in quantum-based computing, something that wasn't that widespread in my world, but something that exists in almost every university in this one. After I created my photonic computers, I didn't even look into quantum computing, something that is proving to be a big mistake on my part. Quantum supercomputers are extremely powerful machines, and except for the basics on how they operate, there isn't much out there that would help an independent person build one. This being said, I have access to several of those supercomputers, so it was easy enough to snatch the blueprints and the necessary research data without other people knowing about it. It was something that Izuku asked me to do when we were 12 since he was interested in how they operated after seeing me build a primitive photonic computer at home. So here we are, two prodigy geniuses trying to figure out how to build a miniature two-dimensional quantum computer hardwired to do a single specific task. The difficulty isn't in creating the circuit lines, that was rather easily achieved with a jutsu that literally burns chakra into the desired pathways, preparing them for use as Fuinjutsu markings. The trick is figuring out how to create these effects in the first place. We've already been working on this for the better part of 6 days, and in that time we managed to create several basic Fuinjutsu. A small low-level shield barrier that I will be inscribing onto our armor along with some booster nodes. It's weak, but it could save our lives in a pinch. Several different seals that convert regular chakra into elemental chakra. Izuku managed to tweak the seals in order to draw power directly from one for all nature energy power bank and route them through the chakra pathway network in the Mjolnir armor suit, thusly bypassing the need to temper OFA's nature energy with his own chakra and thusly decreasing the strain on his body while in combat, though this only works with seals already inscribed in his armor, such as the barrier seals. For anything else he will need to do it in a laboratory setting with specialized equipment that draws power from one for all and artificially tempers it. Besides that, I created a few directional seals to direct elemental chakra for use in laboratory tests. Hopefully with this I can break through the wall I encountered when researching more advanced elemental abilities. If he can modify them, Izuku's combat prowess will rise exponentially, even if he will most likely have to carry a stack of pre-written seals into battle. Using seals like this, I was able to deduce the ration of wind and fire release chakra necessary to produce plasma release, a more powerful variant of scorch release. It won't be long until I manage to find the correct proportions for dust release and wood release. Another very important seal we invented is a restraining seal. When in use, it would prevent the yin and yang energies of a person from combining in their quirk factor or chakra nexus, thusly rendering them powerless. Of course, a person with an active chakra system would just burn through it because it's not deigned to handle such people. That is also a security feature to ensure that the seal can't be turned against us. All the work we've done so far is stored on paper. Izuku was adamant that we couldn't trust our computer's defense systems in protecting something as valuable as this, so in order to not take any chances with this, we would need to carry the research notes with us wherever we went. In this world of quirks, we couldn't be sure that there wasn't someone that can render even the most secure vaults useless, but there was a slight problem with keeping all our work with us. Said research notes were in several stacks a meter high, and by the way we were working, it didn't appear as if we would stop anytime soon. So that's why for the past 2 days we've been banging our heads against this problem. Now, for anyone knowledgeable in Narutoverse lore, you would know that this is easily solved with the use of a storage seal. Problem is that we don't know how to make said seal. Our Fuinjutsu is based on the known laws of physics, since using it requires one to be aware of how things work in order to change them. It's a simple matter of the science not being advanced enough yet to do this. An explosion followed by screaming and a stream of curse words that would make Katsuki blush came from the testing chamber. I sighed and went inside only to find Izuku covered in soot and attempting to punch his way through the wall that wasn't as scorched as the rest. "Oi, Izuku, calm down," I called out. I reached for a towel and handed it to him. "Thanks," mumbled Izuku. "Hey, why are you looking so down, little brother?" I asked. The answer was obvious, but I need to comfort him emotionally. Izuku never dealt well with failure. He tends to bottle everything up until it destroys him from the inside. "Sorry, it's just, I thought that I had it, Nii-san. Any variant of Fuinjutsu that messes with space-time is a pain and a half to develop. It will take us much more than a couple of days to figure it out. Heck, what we've done so far could be considered miraculous by most people's standards. This being said, you know that it will go faster if we use the base's computers to run simulations," I said. "No. We can't let our research notes unsecured," said Izuku vehemently. I blinked. "What's with the paranoia, little brother?" Izuku didn't speak. He pointed his right hand at the center of the training ground and made a motion with his fingers as if he was gripping something. A moment later, a green circle filled with a multitude of green lines inside appeared between his fingers. In an instant my Sharingan was active and I saw in slow motion as a stream of fire erupted from the small disc and struck the opposite wall with enough power to scorch it. I gaped at it. "That was Fuinjutsu, wasn't it?" I asked. Izuku nods. I have no words. I thought that only special Fuinjutsu like the Flying Thunder God Guiding Thunder Jutsu and the Summoning Jutsu could spread over thin air. "Yeah, I discovered that when I use Sage Chakra to power the seal creation jutsu, it can materialize in thin air," said Izuku proudly, "though I still need to use normal chakra to activate the seal and provide it with power." I am beyond words. Of course, Izuku is a sage, how could I be so foolish? Whatever you call it, merging one's own energies with nature energy and being able to use the resulting energy makes you a sage in my eyes. Of course, Izuku's not that powerful, since he barely has the chakra levels I had when I was 5, but merging that chakra with nature energy allows him to boost himself, physically at least, in a whole other league. And with this discovery in a year, I can be confident that Izuku will be able to take on the likes of Endeavor and win. I smirked at him. "So should I be calling you a Fuinjutsu master yet?" I teased. Izuku sputtered, losing his former bravado, and blushed. "Mean Nii-san." I laughed and threw an arm over his shoulder. "Now come on, I think it's time I taught you how to cling to vertical surfaces with chakra." Izuku looked at me and smiled. I grinned back and Izuku lost his smile. He tried to remove my arm from his shoulder, but I held on tight. Nii-san, can you let me go?" asked Izuku nervously. "Nah, we've got training to do. After all, you wouldn't want to pass out from chakra exhaustion at school, would you?" I said. Izuku's cries were heard throughout the complex for the next day, and now there's a distinctly Izuku-shaped indentation in the training area's floor. Before I started work on my Fuinjutsu projects, I sent a clone on a very important mission. The day after Izuku's entrance exam was my graduation ceremony and my official induction into the ranks of pro heroes. It was a big party with a lot of fanfare around me. Of course, All Might made an appearance and congratulated me personally. I could tell that he was proud of me and what I achieved. Almost every top 10 hero was there, even Endeavor, and this time he seemed to have brought a tag along. It was a kid, about my age, with heterochromatic eyes and hair. The most distinctive feature about him was the burn mark over his blue eye. This was interesting, and it appears that All Might wants to go and meet with him. I politely excused myself from making small talk with the pro hero Ingenium and make my way to All Might. Even if I was a bit smaller in height than the adults, I was in no way less imposing, even when I stood next to All Might. Since every hero was in his costume, that meant that I was currently wearing the Mjolnir MK armor I created in secret over the last few months. Compared to all the other heroes, I looked dressed for a war. Endeavor. Thanks for coming, it's been such a long time since we last talked, said All Might jovially. All Might. This is my son, Shoto, replied Endeavor curtly. Endeavor Pro, I see that you've arrived. I must say, I wasn't expecting you to come. And who is this? I said, making my presence known. I gave the kid named Shoto a cursory glance. Shoto bowed respectfully in greeting after a glare from his father. Rikudou Pro, I am Shoto Todoroki, said the kid. My Sharingan flashed as I observed him in depth. Oddly enough, he seemed to be favoring his left leg. This spoke of an injury. Probably a training-related accident, after all. The same has happened to Izuku and I a few times. Ah, you've raised quite a son, Endeavor. I heard that he has taken the recommended exam for UA, said All Might. Shoto is my greatest creation, All Might. Though I see that yours isn't lacking either, bit back Endeavor with a blank look on his face. Creation? Is this how he speaks about his son? I observed Shoto again. He seemed to be looking at his father with ill-disguised contempt. This I must look into. It's quite possible that something sinister is going on in the Todoroki family. Is that so? I asked with a carefully blank face. Well then, I'm looking forward to this year's sport festival. After all, it would be quite embarrassing if you would recreate your loss at my hands, Endeavor. What was it? Ah, yes, I remember a single fire attack from me that melted half the training arena and knocked you unconscious, I said nonchalantly. It was a most blatant act of provocation, but I had my reasons. Shoto's eyes widened at what I said, and I could sense his anger at my words, combined with astonishment. Meanwhile, Endeavor fumed at the reminder of his defeat. He took a step forward and opened his mouth to say something, but immediately stopped, and my eyes flashed red and the fabled Sharingan was activated. Endeavor was forced to look away. Among the pro-hero circles, I disseminated some information about my eyes. Now it's common knowledge that to look directly into my eyes is tantamount suicide, even among villains. Of course, since most villains rely on their quirks so much, they can't really fight all that well, and when you add to that the necessity of not looking into my eyes when combating me, their chances drop to an almost zero level of success against me. After all, I'm not arrogant enough to say that I'm unbeatable, just very hard to beat. Now, some may say that letting such information loose may cause me problems, but actually the reverse is true. Even without my ability to cast visual genjutsu, I'm still more than capable of beating anyone in hand-to-hand combat. These days, not even All Might can stand against me. All Might cleared his throat. Well, I think it's time for us to go. Endeavor Pro, have a nice evening. All Might hurried to take me away, and when we were far enough he turned to me. Why did you antagonize Endeavor, Madara? To see how Shoto would react, I answered. This surprised All Might, whose expression darkened after that. Do you think something's going on in his family? He asked. Ha! It seemed that All Might wasn't a muscle-bound idiot after all. I don't know. I'll ask Izuku after he gets to know Shoto a bit better. But if that does happen to be the truth. My eyes flashed red once again. Well, let's just say that it won't be pretty. // To most people, Kigo Takami was known as the number 3 pro hero Hawks. He was the carefree winged hero that was too fast for anyone bar All Might to catch when it came to hero work. However, behind this facade of nonchalance laid a keen mind. When he heard that the new golden boy of the hero community was graduating, at age 15 and after only a year of high school, he was of course intrigued. Thanks to his unique position in the Hero Commission, he was able to access Madara Midoriya's restricted files, and what he saw left him impressed. Hawks has seen Madara's many feats of power, but he couldn't have guessed that behind that power laid such a genius mind. He had long wished to meet Madara in person, and now he appeared to have been granted the chance. The dinner party was a high-end affair, even though you couldn't tell that by looking at most of the guests there. Only a few members of the Hero Commission were invited along with the families of some pro-heroes. The rest were heroes dressed in their usual hero costumes. During the beginning of the party, at the actual graduation ceremony, he got to lay his eyes on Madara in person for the first time. Never before in his life had Hawks met such a person. Even standing beside All Might himself, Hawks could feel the pure power that seemed to flow from Madara, making him look that much more imposing. As if being dressed in gleaming black and red armor wouldn't do that. As Madara made his speech, Hawks couldn't help but feel drawn to his words. Madara oozed charisma in a way no one besides All Might could. For a moment, Hawks wondered if there might be some truth to that theory. As Madara mingled with the guests, Hawks kept up observing the young man. Madara moved with a grace and poise that spoke of years of hard training and an unbelievable amount of experience for one so young. Not even he was that experienced at his age, even with all the training the Hero Commission put him through. Hawks managed to observe how Madara provoked Endeavor. That action was puzzling. Besides that fact that Endeavor was colder than usual towards Might Tower Agency, there wasn't any need for Madara to be this antagonistic. Just as Hawks moved to defuse the situation, All Might stepped in and broke up the discussion. Still, Hawks approached Madara. When he came to about 10 meters from Madara, the world suddenly stopped. "Impressive, isn't it, the power of the human mind," said Madara behind Hawks. Hawks turned to him, still bewildered at what happened. "How dash? Don't worry, this is merely an illusion so that we can converse privately," said Madara. So, this was the power of Madara's Sharingan. What a tremendous ability, and to think I didn't even notice him locking eyes with me, thought Hawks. "So, what did you wish to talk about?" asked Hawks. Madara smiled tightly. "Be a good dog and let your masters know that I don't bow as easily as All Might," said Madara. Hawks was stunned and more than a little offended. "Excuse me? I guess you won't believe me without proof then," said Madara. In that moment the scenery changed. Instead of a mass of frozen people, Hawks was greeted to the sight of a destroyed city. He could quite clearly see the main headquarters of the Hero Commission in ruins before him. Hawks was so shocked that he took a step back. What is this? This is the aftermath of a battle for someone at my level. Now, I'm not showing you this to threaten you, quite the opposite really. I want the Hero Commission to understand that our relationship is a partnership. Not an employment agreement. We will of course maintain the facade for the media, but that will be the true nature of our relationship, said Madara. The kid seemed nonplussed that he had just threatened the number 3 hero and the Hero Commission. Hawks gathered his wits. What do you want? Access to the Hero Commission's classified archives. I expect a phone call from your bosses in a week, said Madara. And if they don't call you? Asked Hawks. He couldn't let this kid walk all over him and the commission. Madara smiled grimly and looked at him with those blood-red Sharingan of his. Well, then I suppose that a change of management will be needed. Suddenly the world snapped back to normal and Madara was nowhere to be seen. // In a hidden laboratory under Jaku Hospital, a secret meeting was taking place. How goes the progress on the new weapons, my friend? Very good. Since we had to accelerate the procedure, they aren't as carefully constructed, but they are more powerful. It's wise to be mindful of the high ends. I haven't quite yet managed to fully suppress the host's ego or correct all behavioral issues. Don't worry, it will do for now. How is the search going? We're closing in on Chisaki. I can't wait to get my hands on his quirk. It's such a shame that a quirk such as that was born in such an ungrateful body. Yes, a shame indeed. Fortunately, it won't be long before we remedy that injustice and I will get restored to my previous state. Isn't that dangerous? What if the plan fails? The plan has changed. I will need a great deal of strength to deal with All Might's brat and steal his quirk. In the unlikely event that I fail, well, you know what to do. Of course, my lord. Life had been very strange for Katsuki over the past year. First, Deku left school and allegedly took an exam to graduate from middle school into high school. Odd thing was that his mother wouldn't tell him where Deku was, so Katsuki assumed that he was shipped off to Nerd Island to slave away at a support company or whatever. Of course, there was his brother, Madara. There wasn't a single day where Katsuki could walk out of the house without learning about the latest adventure of All Might's heir. That title pissed him off badly, but it didn't really matter. He would climb up to the number 1 spot even if he had to do it over Madara's defeated form instead of All Might's. The months passed quickly and eventually the UA entrance exam came for his generation. Katsuki was pissed that Madara managed to graduate from UA in a single year, but he just decided to set it as his standard to beat. What he didn't expect was meeting Deku on the way to UA. At first he was stunned by Deku's presence at the exam. He wanted to go and question him so badly that he thought that he might just explode, but Katsuki kept his impulses reined in. This was not the time to go on a murderous rampage, so he settled for glaring at him. He didn't see Deku after that. Then again, it was likely that the nerd just went to apply to the support course. After all, the support course of UA was a prestigious one, and as much as he hated to say it, Deku had a good head on his shoulder for research. A week later the results came and Katsuki's world came crashing down upon him. He wasn't the first, he was second. Right after Deku, who beat him by 10 villain points and close to 60 rescue points. When school started he got to see Deku again. The nerd walked confidently in the classroom, his classroom, and was instantly assaulted by the stuck-up private school kid and a round-faced girl. Deku hadn't changed much, behavior-wise at least. He was still the same shy nerd he'd always been. Katsuki was tempted to have a little explosive talk with Deku, but he yet again reined himself in. Despite his hooligan-like appearance, Katsuki cared deeply about his school record. It wouldn't do to be reprimanded for starting a fight before the year even started. It didn't matter what pebbles air in his class, after all he's the strongest of them all. That view would change once their homeroom teacher, a homeless-looking guy called Aizawa, took them out for the so-called quirk apprehension test. Katsuki thought that it was finally his time to shine. After all, none of these other extras had a quirk to match his own, surely. He was wrong, so very wrong. First there was that ice-hot kid that beat him. Then there was that girl that can make shit out of nothing that also beat him. But worst of all was Deku. He beat everyone. This wasn't supposed to happen. Deku was quirkless, powerless. Sure, he may have some skill with martial arts and he's a genius nerd, but that doesn't mean that he can simply bypass his lack of a quirk. What's more is that Deku was showing off feats that couldn't have been achieved without a quirk. Somehow he was super fast and super strong, though he did give off that strange green lightning effect when he used his powers. Katsuki dearly wished to go up to that nerd and get his answers from the source, but as he willed his body forward, something stopped him. It was something terrifying, the kind of terror that would root you on the spot. Katsuki could envision those bright red eyes with little dots swirling inside the pupil looking down at him. He wanted to be angry, to rage and fight against this terror, but his body wouldn't listen. It seemed that even after 10 years, he could not go against the warning Madara gave him on that fateful day. Aizawa looked at his class. He'd just finished with his test and it seemed that this year's lot was full of potential. It was now up to him to guide that potential. He could see his class's reaction to the quirk apprehension test, and while most were falling into the norm, there were 2 that did not. This, however, was not unexpected. After all, he would be worried if they did fall within the norm. Bakugo Katsuki and Todoroki Shoto, one the second highest scorer in the entrance exam, the other a recommended student and son of Endeavor. Both had met Madara Midoriya and both had seen the measure of his power. It was only natural that they be curious about Madara's brother that was rumored to have the same power as him, even if it wasn't true. Still, even with a mere fraction of his full potential power, Izuku Midoriya proved himself a worthy opponent. Aizawa freely admits that the tests were skewed towards those who possessed physical enhancement quirks, but a keen mind could overcome these tests even with a non-augmentative quirk. After all, the purpose of this test was to weed out those that were physically inept or mentally incompetent. The following day, Aizawa watched All Might's first official class. As you would expect, all the students were hyped up for some action with their favorite hero. Normally it would seem moronic to throw the students into a simulated situation such as the one All Might had planned, but Aizawa was there to step in case anything bad happened. He would have preferred if Madara was there as well, to supervise the blonde fool. After all, he was the only one that could literally beat some sense into him. The battles weren't anything special, with the possible exception of Todoroki's feat of freezing the building the enemy team was in. It was a bold decision, and Aizawa would have given it a full score, if it was a 1 versus 1 or a 1 versus multiple type of engagement. In the current situation, Todoroki's decision was foolish. If the enemy team had a quirk that could work as a suitable counter to Todoroki's ice, the kid would be in big trouble, and because he turned the building into a glacier he rendered his own teammate useless. Another battle that drew Aizawa's attention was little Midoriya's fight with Bakugo. The explosive kid was out for blood, that was obvious. It was somewhat surprising that Midoriya did not give in to Bakugo's overcompetitive nature. From what Madara had told him, Bakugo was still living a childish dream, one that all children have but are broken out of by the time they reach middle school. In Bakugo's case, the school only fed this false image, and although Madara had a hand in staying Bakugo's more violent actions, he was still a kid at the time, and no matter how smart, a kid is still a kid. It would seem that yesterday's test had shaken Bakugo's worldview, not terribly, but enough that the cumulative effect it had with other events of the last few years have pushed Bakugo to the edge. As Aizawa watched as Midoriya took down Bakugo in 2 seconds flat and knocked him out, he couldn't help but sigh. It would seem that he had to deal with Bakugo's temper sooner rather than later. Preferably before he murdered someone. // Todoroki Shoto was an observant guy. He had been trained since childhood to be as perfect a hero as possible by his father Endeavor. He couldn't help but feel that all the pain and suffering he and his family had endured was for nothing as he watched the scene playing on the screen in the battle center. Izuku Midoriya truly was Rikudou's brother. When he first laid eyes on him in that classroom, he couldn't help but think that he had been deceived. They looked almost exactly the same, save for the hair of course, but in almost every other respect they were vastly different. What truly differentiated them were their personalities. From what little he had interacted with Rikudou, the man seemed to exude charisma and arrogance. Though, given the level of his power, that arrogance was not undeserved. The quirk test was a true eye-opener. He had glimpsed Rikudou's prowess on the TV from several media coverages of his heroic acts and from watching last year's sports festival. It was true that while Midoriya did not take the absolute highest scores in every test, but he was always among the top 3 and most often than not, number 1. In a way, it was frustrating to see him perform so well and to see his years of training go to waste, but there was nothing he could do. Izuku Midoriya shared his blood and power with someone that took out his father in a single attack in a fair fight, a feat that not even All Might could replicate. Madara Midoriya was also reported to have fought and won a training engagement with All Might himself. At the moment, in terms of raw power, Madara was the number 1. He had surpassed All Might before he even turned 15. Such was how his father described him, and after meeting him in person, Shoto could say that he was correct. When he first realized who Izuku Midoriya was, Shoto was eager to see his performances. After all, Madara had an unacknowledged bet with his father that he would lose to his little brother. It was thus that Shoto decided to observe the younger Midoriya. Izuku was different from his brother. He was shy and kind, lacking the arrogance and confidence of his elder sibling. He did not lack, however, in fighting prowess. He was clearly a skilled martial artist to have incapacitated Bakugo in a second without the use of his quirk. Still, it mattered not. Shoto would prove his superiority using only his ice. // It's strange to think that only a few days have passed since Izuku's first year at UA began. This being said, it was only logical that some manner of enemy action would befall the school sooner or later. Honestly, if I didn't know better, I'd say that I was reborn in a shonen manga. I was having a good day busting up a drug trafficking ring. Honestly, it surprised me just how little of the hero population was willing to dirty their hands with this sort of action. Though after I got access to the Hero Commission's classified files, all became oh so very clear. The current system was corrupted and weighed down by unnecessary people and baggage. Over the years, the admittance tests to hero courses and the license exams themselves have fallen to a surprisingly low standard. In fact, my hero license exam could be considered difficult since only 50% of the participants passed. 50% out of more than 1,000 participants passed. In a twisted way, my choice to be heavily involved with the police and Officer Tsukachi in particular boosted my popular approval ratings. A few major events and I'll literally be the youngest ever to breach the top 10 list. Just like Hawks had done, only this time I did it without the Hero Commission pulling strings behind the back of the citizens. Back to the present though. The enemy action that I was talking about was the destruction, or more particularly the disintegration of UA's main gate barrier. So, what do you think, Rikudou? Asked Mizu. Since I was technically working, I had to come to the school dressed in my Mjolnir armor, though to be completely frank, I've been virtually living at Might Tower over the last month working cases. It's incredible just how little resistance these people have to the Sharingan's hypnotic effects. I turned to the diminutive principal. This was the work of a powerful quirk. The metal isn't so much disintegrated as it is heavily oxidized, something that is indicative of degradation. Quirk of some kind, I said. We checked the reporters. None had a quirk such as you describe, said Aizawa. Then this was clearly enemy action. One aimed at the school in general and at several people in particular, I said. do you have anything to use as proof for your theory? Asked Nizu. No, this is based only on my intuition and whatever meager conclusions I can draw from the remains of this destroyed gate, I said. I see. If I may, Rikudou, I would like to make a request, said Nizu. It was thus how I ended up in this predicament. I was currently standing next to Aizawa, in front of Class 1A, under a transformation technique pretending to be a second-year management department student that was writing an article on how students train under all might for the school paper that will, of course, be made available to the general public. Fortunately, this was a recognized sting operation and all it cost me was my dignity. Fuck my life. Good news is that I can get some blackmail on Izuku in case I need it. It felt weird in a way, to stand next to these impressionable children as they all gushed about what they thought they will be doing during their rescue training exercise. I remember the first time I went to the USJ quite well. It is an impressive structure and one that I dearly hoped would survive the coming storm relatively intact. True, I had no proof that there might be a villain attack today, but it made an awful lot of sense when you think about it. The perpetrator used the gathered crowd of reporters as a smokescreen to enter UA. The most likely goal of this action was to gather intel on the schedule and the students that will be attending off-campus facilities. Say what you will about UA security, but attacking the main building was nothing short of suicide, even for someone of Endeavor's caliber. They were probably planning on ambushing a group of students at the USJ regardless of who those students were. Class 1A just so happened to be the first on the list. I looked around at the kids dressed up in their hero costumes. Honestly, they looked somewhat ridiculous in my eyes. They were so cheerful. It was almost heartbreaking to think that they were more than likely going to face villains by the end of the day. To the side, Aizawa was signaling me to come to him. I smiled and nodded, acting just like any other management department general course student, even if I was clad in high-grade armor underneath the henge I was using to appear as a generic 16-year-old student. Is everything set? I asked. Yes. All Might's not going to make it, though, said Aizawa. I cursed. My original plan was to help evacuate the students with 13 while All Might and Aizawa held the villains off. After that it was my turn to give the villains a good smack down. Unfortunately, it seems like All Might used all his time in his muscle form on petty thugs on the way to school. TCH, I should have expected it, I said in annoyance. Do we cancel the event? Asked Aizawa with a worried undertone in his voice. The truth of the matter was that facing down a well-organized group of villains would be problematic. If only I had more time to track down the perpetrators, this wouldn't have happened. I'll have to expect some kind of blowback from the media regardless of what will happen. I need to handle this with the utmost care. No. It's annoying, but I'll probably have to reveal my henge ability in the worst-case scenario. It can't be helped, the mission must continue, I said annoyed. All right, problem child, this is your show, said Aizawa, leaving unsaid that don't screw it up at the end. I rejoined Class 1A as they got on the bus. This class was quite the lively bunch. So, Akito-san, what do you think so far of the hero course, said the red-haired kid on the bench opposite to mine, Kirishima I think his name was. Oh, it's nice, I'm sure that you will all become great heroes, I said with a placating smile. I wasn't expecting my cover persona to be dragged into a discussion with the students of 1A, at least not one where said students weren't openly boasting about their powers. I suppose that Aizawa was right to keep this lot. Ha, thanks, though I have to ask, have you ever met Rikudou when you were at school last year? Asked Kirishima. I stiffened imperceptibly. With a quick glance around I could see that the rest of the students were also paying attention to the conversation, Izuku, Katsuki and Todoroki in particular. Why do you ask? I said, faking nervousness. What do you mean, why do we ask? That guy's a legend. He's the youngest pro hero ever and he's powerful enough to beat Endeavor and All Might, said a kid with blonde hair and a lightning bolt like black strands in it, Kaminari if I'm not mistaken. I mean, yeah, I met him once during our first year sports festival, I said, keeping up with the cover's known history. This drew the attention of the class even more so than our previous discussion. So how was he in person? Asked Kirishima with an excited smile on his face. I didn't meet him in person, per se, but I can tell you that I don't remember much after the horn sounded and announced the second round, I said. Some might feel bad for lying to these kids, but I have no such inhibitions. After all, I couldn't care less if this entire class would die so long as Izuku was safe. This being said, I believe that this mentality is more or less a result of my desire to not fall under the curse of hatred. To do that, the most effective way is to prevent the Manjikyu from activating and prevent any situation that would require and or force its activation. TCH, of course you wouldn't, grumbled Katsuki. So, you can't tell us anything about Rikudou? Asked Todoroki. Well, I could tell you his name, I said. Time to test out a little theory of mine. This drew the curious eyes of the crowd. From the corner of my eye, I saw the panicked look on Izuku's face. I could also see Aizawa giving me a really look so much so that I struggled to not grin back. So, say it, said Kaminari. I could tell that everyone on the bus was thinking the same thing, minus, of course, those already in the know. I paused dramatically. His name is Madara Midoriya, I said. There was silence in the bus as almost every pair of eyes turned to look at Izuku. I could tell that Izuku was panicking on the inside. Well, panicking more than what was showing on the outside. Okay, that's enough of that. We're here, said Aizawa. That man, ruining my fun like this, and by the look on his face he knew exactly what he was doing. I moved away from the main body of the class and pretended to go to the observation room to the side of the USJ. From there it would be a simple matter to monitor the events in the dome. Class 1A moved inside the large dome structure that was the USJ. Even so, they were only half paying attention to what 13 was telling them. The other half of their mind was occupied with the revelation that one of their classmates was the brother of the most powerful hero student ever. There was not a single person in the country that didn't know about the famed Rikudou. The kid who entered UA at 14 and graduated at 15, all the while taking a place at All Might's side as his heir presumptive. After the regular spiel from 13 about the dangers of their powers, they were led inside. Aizawa was standing next to one of the pillars near the entrance on guard for any suspicious activity. He knew that Madara was doing the same from the observation room, but it never hurt to have more eyes on the job. Just then the lights flickered, and the fountain began to misfire. Aizawa was instantly on high alert. A pool of darkness seemingly appeared in front of the fountain and expanded. People began to exit the darkness. Everyone back. Those are villains, said Aizawa as he prepared himself for battle. The students seemed frightened by his statement. How were they able to get here? Asked Kirishima somewhat rhetorically. Sensei, what about the trespassing sensors, why aren't they activating? Asked Yorizu. They must have some kind of quirk that's blocking them from activating, said 13. Or they have a skilled hacker on their side, commented Izuku. The other students turned to look at him in surprise and Izuku blushed at the attention. Kaminari, see if you can reach anyone outside, ordered Aizawa. No sensei, I can't reach anyone, said Kaminari. That settles it. This is the work of a quirk. 13 take the students away and keep them safe, ordered Aizawa as he prepared himself for battle. Wait. Sensei, you can't seriously think that you can win against all of them. You'll die of exhaustion, said Izuku. Aizawa didn't refute that. Izuku Midoriya knew his fighting style and his body's limitation, and he was correct. In a straight fight against that many opponents, he would lose by exhausting himself against the villains. Don't worry Midoriya, this is just a delaying action. The main event is yet to come, said Aizawa. As if in response to his words, a devastating boom was heard from the outside and the ground shook. Is that All Might? Asked Kirishima. Most students tended to agree with their classmates' semi-rhetorical question, but a few knew better. Another boom and the doors were blasted inwards by the body of a monstrous villain with pitch-black skin and a bird-like grinning face. The villain flipped and landed on his feet at the base of the stairs. As soon as he came to a stop, a blue streak shot forth from the dust that appeared in the wake of the villain's encounter with the doors and rewarded said villain with a sword through his mouth and head. So great was the force the sword was thrown with that the villain found himself nailed to the ground with the sword sticking upwards from his mouth like some sort of perverted mockery of Excalibur's legend. What manner of mongrel dares attack this school? Came a voice from the now settling dust. The students turned their eyes to look at the new arrival, and what they saw rooted them to the ground. Coming out of the smoke dressed in pristine black and red armor was by all intents and purposes an Izuku Midoriya look-alike. However, in their hearts the students knew that was false. This was not their shy green-haired classmate. If you ignored the superficial, the differences were clear. Shorter hair and narrowed glowing green eyes that were looking at the villains before them with contempt. The figure before them was an impressive sight to behold as he walked forward, weathered in blue lightning and outputting enough pressure to be felt across the entirety of the USJ. Rikudou had arrived. I had barely arrived in the control room when the monitors flickered off and the power cut out to the cameras inside the USJ. I had hoped to see at least a bit of the students' capabilities, and in all honesty the villains should have done the same. This means that the leader of the villains was impatient or a risk-taker. Which one it was is still to be determined. I dropped the henge and flooded my body with lightning-natured chakra. I did not activate my now completed lightning chakra armor because like it or not it's a power hog and I most often than not have other means of dealing with my enemies. This being said, it's not like my base speed is anything to be ashamed of, it's just not at the ludicrous level of the speed I have when using the lightning chakra armor. I ran to the entrance and just as I reached it, my instinct screamed at me to dodge. I dodged, barely, and the punch that was meant to take me out buried itself into the ground with a resounding boom. I backflipped away from the being who attacked me. I see, so the villain's designed to send someone to guard the entrance while the main group takes care of the students. A pity that I was the one sent to reinforce them. I ducked under another punch and kicked out at the villain's midsection. The kick was too fast for the villain to react and the power behind it was enough to send it crashing through the doors of USJ and into the large square in the middle of the structure. Strange, the kick had enough power behind it to turn All Might's insides to mush and yet the villain appeared to be able to recover. I drew my sword, charged it with lightning-natured chakra and flung it at the enemy. It became a streak of blue light as it raced to its target and ended up embedding itself into the villain's skull through his mouth, nailing the villain to the floor behind him. I surveyed the area as I exited the dust cloud. What manner of mongrel dares attack this school? I came to a stop at the tip of the stairs and crossed my arms as I looked at the impudent rabble below. One of the villains with whitish blue hair and hands stuck on his body began to scratch his neck intensely. "Nomu," he said. My advanced hearing could make out what he was saying despite the distance. As soon as he said that, the villain that I had just killed brought his hand up and grasped the handle of the sword I had thrown into his mouth and pulled it out. I couldn't help but be slightly repulsed by the sight. What manner of creature was that? No human could have survived having their brainstem destroyed. The creature returned to its master's side and stood alongside another creature, presumably of the same origin as itself. This being said, I couldn't help but feel that this other creature is much more powerful than its sibling creation. It is clear, this is no mere attack but the opening shot of a much greater war. Villains, identify yourself and your intentions and I may yet consider your pleas for mercy, I declared loudly. The villains looked up at me startled and I flashed my Sharingan on. At the sight of these eyes most of the villains began to take a step back and avert their eyes, having heard of my hypnotic powers. Suddenly before me a black abyss appeared in the shape of a drain and out of this abyss two glowing yellow eyes appeared. We are the League of Villains. Our mission here is to ensure that this location is All Might's grave. I have to say, I didn't think that the famed Rikudou himself would come to the children's rescue. It seems that All Might has failed in his task as the symbol of peace, said the owner of the eyes in the darkness. I raised an eyebrow. Is this it? No idealistic speech about what's wrong with society and other such acts of theater? Well then, this is interesting. Interesting, your group is clearly a new one or I would have heard of a quirk like yours being used for villainous acts. The question remains, will you come quietly, or must I use force to make you, I said. The eyes narrowed and as he began to speak again I made my move. In an instant I was in front of him and my Sharingan bore into his yellow eyes. I am possible. Sharingan, Genjutsu. Kurogyri, yelled the hands guy. His body instantly formed and I grabbed the villain by his now exposed metallic collar. How? He asked as he tried futilely to rid himself of the bonds of the Genjutsu I had him placed under. Wouldn't you like to know, now I'll be taking all the info that's in that little head of yours. Try not to resist, it would make this whole ordeal go quicker, I said as my Sharingan glowed brightly and the Tomo began to spin. I felt its mind resisting my intrusion but it was futile. I broke through its meager defenses and began extracting its memories. I doubt that I could have used this method on anyone capable of wielding chakra even at a most basic level. Nomu, kill him, screamed the hands guy. Even though I was looking into the eyes of my target as I was rummaging through its surprisingly empty mind, my Sharingan could detect the beam of energy that was hurtling towards me, having been fired by the other creature. Breaking my mental connection with the one now identified as Kurogyri, I threw my captive into the nearby lake. This would more than likely lead to his escape and if not then he will drown. I can't be too careless with the lives of villains, especially not when there are impressionable children behind me. If I did then the media and the Hero Commission would raise a fuss and give me more headaches than a teleporting villain, and yes, pun intended. Reaching into my pouch I withdrew 7 pre-prepared Fuinjutsu talismans and threw them between myself and the beam. Now, I wouldn't normally use an untested technique like this, but I can't dodge the beam or else it would hit the group of students behind me that were busy evacuating. Fuinjutsu barrier style, Rho AIAs. I said as I thrust my hand forward. I maneuvered the talismans in place with chakra strings and activated the seal. From each talisman a blue sealing circle spun into existence, and from each circle a single line was sent to the origin, in this case my palm, where another bigger circle spun into existence. Just as the beam reached me, 7 concave golden layers of chakra appeared before me, each bearing the fuinjutsu of the seal tag that spawned it. The beam stuck the next moment, and its force was so great that it sent me skidding back towards the group of frightened students. I reinforced my feet with chakra and used chakra's suction properties to stick to the ground, but even so the pressure was so immense that it cracked the ground beneath my feet. The first layer failed the very next moment, sending a shockwave through the air behind me. I could hear the screams of the students as the harsh winds buffed against them, forcing them to take cover behind the cupola provided by my shield. The second layer broke and the beam showed no signs of stopping. If nothing else, it seemingly increased in power. The power burst was enough to shatter the third barrier. I clenched my fist as I focused more chakra into the barrier, doing my best to keep the beam at bay. I had more than half of the original barrier's total layers, so I wasn't too worried. The fourth barrier broke just as the beam shut down. I kept the shield up for a few moments as I surveyed the enemy. They seemed shocked at my survival. "Enai-san," yelled Izuku as he tried to get to me. "I'm okay, Izuku. Ro AIAs has proven effective," I said as I allowed the remaining 3 layers to dispel and the remaining 3 tags that didn't shatter burned up as the fuinjutsu that was maintaining them was dispelled. You cheater," yelled the hands guy. He seemed to be scratching his neck furiously, and I'm sure that his eyes were gleaming with madness behind that severed hand that covered his face. Now that I'm thinking about it, disgusting, absolutely disgusting. "Tamura Shigaraki, calm yourself," said Kurojairi. That seemed to snap the now-named Shigaraki out of his scratching frenzy. If you weren't out Warp Gate, I would have turned you to dust, Kurojairi. That man, he lied to me. That energy beam the Nomu fired should have destroyed All Might in one shot, yelled Shigaraki. The students heard this and looked at me in shock. A most accurate assessment. If it was able to hit All Might, it would have indeed been enough to kill him, I said in a low tone. I was heard by the class behind me. I think that some are crying. "Enai-san," I heard behind me. I turned just enough to get a look at the kids with the corner of my eyes. Their faces told me all that was needed to. "Don't worry, everything will be all right." "Why?" Their eyes widened and I swear that Izuku was crying. "Because I am here," I roared. My chakra surged, cracking the ground even more than it already was, as the familiar feel of lighting covered me in a storm of blue arcs, signaling the activation of the famed lightning-style chakra armor. I didn't need to look back to know that every single student gave off a relieved breath of relief at my words. For the villains, this was probably their worst nightmare, as they all were preparing to flee, and even Shigaraki took a step back in fright. I withdrew 4 kunai from my pouch that had special sealing tags attached to the end. With a flick of my wrist, they were embedded into the 4 corners of the plateau we were standing in. "Izuku, do you have the distributor seal on you?" I asked. "Huh? Why yes, I have it," said Izuku as he took out a small piece of paper with the seal. "Good, I need you to protect your classmates with this barrier," I said, motioning at the 4 kunai with tags at the end. All the color drained from Izuku's face. "Enai-san, I can't," began Izuku, but I cut him off. "I'll erect the barrier, however I need you to maintain it," I said. I didn't have much time for talk. I needed to go in now. "Rikudou, we can't keep them here," said Aizawa, looking worried. "Here is the safest place for them. The barrier will hold against anything other than that warp guy or the 2 creatures. If I was ambushed outside, what's to say that there won't be other traps?" I cut him off. The man gave me a reluctant nod. I began my hand seals. Fuinjutsu barrier style, heavenly 4-wind rotation. Behind me Izuku was awkwardly folding his hand into seals as he slapped his hand on the small seal on the ground. From each of the sealing tags on the kunai, a blue fuinjutsu circle once again spun into existence. From their lines were drawn between them and the small green circle that spun into existence from Izuku's seal. Once connected, a greater circle spun into existence and the barrier sprung into existence as a thin but deadly layer of wind blades circling at close to Mach 10. Once that was done, I sprang into action, the ground cracking even more as I shot forward and down the stairs, appearing to be a blue blur to all who saw me. "Run!" yelled the villains, but they were too slow. On the way down I retrieved my once discarded sword. I slowed down just enough to once again be visible and not kill anyone with my punches. This being said, while I might have lost the blue streak, my chakra-saturated sword did not. As I swung it, a blue hue was constantly emitted, making my swordsmanship something to behold as my lighting-coated saber sliced through various appendages of the villains. Nothing truly crippling, they might not be able to use their quirk after this, but then again they wouldn't have been allowed to regardless. After I was done incapacitating their quirks, I used the lightning that my armor gave of as a short-range stunner. That way I didn't need to get close to them and try to punch them. "Nomu," yelled Shigaraki. Looking at him, I saw that the first creature was nowhere to be seen. My instinct screamed at me, but in the position I was in couldn't dodge and thusly I could only block. I put my faith in my technique and took the blow from the Nomu head-on. Because I was off balance, I was thrown back and ended up skidding across the lake. Suckers, I can walk on water. Water style, water dragon bullet. As soon as I finished the hand seals, 3 great water dragons shot up from the lake and let loose a most terrible roar. I rode on the head of the 3rd dragon and finishing another set of hand seals, the water sparked as lighting-natured chakra coursed through it. Lightning style, spider web. The villains that were hiding in the water were knocked unconscious and some might have drowned, let's not dwell on that. The 2 dragons in front crashed into the central plaza and managed to wipe off most of the villains and the muscled Nomu. Shigaraki and Kurojiri were saved by a shield erected by the apparently catatonic Nomu that fired that beam at me at the beginning of our fight. Fire style, great fireball. I jumped off the dragon as I took a deep breath and spat out a fireball the size of a small house at the shield. My remaining water dragon was headed to another open zone to stun the villains there and prevent their escape. Meanwhile, I had to deal with the Nomu. As I was falling, I put my hand up and used one of the most iconic techniques in my arsenal. Rinnegan. I roared as a giant spinning ball of blue chakra roared into existence in my palm. The Rinnegan was easily bigger than me, but I did not care as I brought it down on the head of the poor Nomu. Burst! I roared. The ball ballooned and shot out of my hand with tremendous force, carving a trench through the ground of the USJ and then carving in half the fake mountain of the mudslide zone before finally punching through the dome of the USJ and turning upwards, leaving 2 trails of blue light swirling together in a helix before finally detonating high in the sky with a spectacular explosion. I landed near the base of the stairs and turned to face the remaining enemies. They weren't looking good. Shigaraki was severely burnt and Kurojiri appeared to have lost quite a bit of his mist. The Nomu on the other hand was still alive and kicking and apparently healing. Good thing that I took out the other one with that much overkill. After all, it's impossible to heal from being atomized. No. I refuse to accept game over. You cheater. The final boss was supposed to appear at the end, not at the beginning, yelled Shigaraki. We must withdraw Shigaraki Tamura. We cannot defeat him and the Nomu can't even match him. We have lost, said Kurojiri. Perhaps, but we can make sure that he doesn't win, said Shigaraki, now unexpectedly calm. I could see a maniacal grin forming behind his face hand that put me instantly on guard. You aren't doing any of that, came Aizawa's voice. His capture weapon warped tightly around the 2 of them and his quirk was active. That meant no warping for Kurojiri, and if what I learned from him is correct, then no decay for Shigaraki. Still, Shigaraki's grin didn't abate. Eraser, cover their mouths, I yelled. Nomu, kill everyone, ordered Shigaraki. The creature screeched and let loose a burst of power that knocked Aizawa back, forcing him to blink. That fraction of a second was all it took and Kurojiri and Shigaraki warped away. Eraser. I roared again. It's not working. Aizawa yelled back. The barrier against the creature was apparently capable of mitigating Aizawa's quirk then. Intriguing. I looked at the screeching creature and my Sharingan detected what could only be described as an immense power accumulating where its heart should be. My eyes widened in understanding as the creature let loose a shockwave-like barrier. I dashed to Aizawa and used my body to shield him, allowing my lightning chakra armor and actual armor take the blow. Still, it was powerful enough to disrupt my armor's circuits and shut down my shield. Looking back, I saw it priming what could only be described as some sort of energy breath, most likely the same attack I blocked earlier. As it did so, the curious-looking cylindrical things lining its back and hands depressed into its flesh, making the creature's muscles balloon up. With my Sharingan, I could see the power coursing through its veins suddenly increase tenfold and become something extremely unstable. It wouldn't be wrong for me to say that the creature had somehow tapped into the hidden power of the 8 gates, and this is some sort of artificial method of extracting said power, though at a terrible cost. Eraser, that thing's going kamikaze and plans to take us out with it. Retreat to the shield dome if it's still up, if not take the kids and go as far as you can, I said. What about you, Rikudou, he asked. A stupid pointless question, Aizawa. Don't you know that already? I am here, after all, I said back with a grin. Aizawa held my Sharingan gaze for a moment before breaking out in a sprint up the stairs. I turned my eyes back on the monster in front of me. Fuck it, I won't let some third-rate science experiment kill me. Lightning swirled around my arm as I drew it back and consolidated in my hand as a spear. Lightning style, lightning spear. I threw the spear at the Nomu, though this only seemed to enrage it as it engaged once again its barrier. The lightning spear crashed against the barrier and for a moment it seemed to work, but suddenly the barrier began spinning and the spear skipped on the now uneven surface and landed in the fire zone, making a giant hole in the dome cover, allowing villains and fire to escape. Fuck this, Earth style, cataclysmic quake. I roared. I slapped my hands on the ground as I finished my hand seals and flared my chakra. The ground trembled as it cracked under the immense forces I was putting upon it. The grounds of the USJ ruptured as if they were great tectonic plates. The fissures didn't only remain on the ground. The massive dome that covered the arena split and tore asunder with massive chunks of concrete and metal falling from the sky. The small-time villains that were still conscious and alive on the ground below huddled together in fear of the might before them. The lake of the shipwreck zone cracked and spilled its water and the resulting flood engulfed the storm dome, knocking down buildings and crushing villains in the debris. I stopped the jutsu and stood back up. I calmed and centered myself. This fight has already exhausted almost a quarter of my chakra. Ha, I'm a monster. I couldn't stop myself from grinning. Never before had I had such a satisfying fight, it's almost a shame it has to end. Earth style, great bedrock shut. I roared. Chakra flared as I held my hands clasped together in the snake seal. The ground trembled once again and moved. In a seemingly impossible feat, the 7 shards of the USJ moved away from one another, crushing all in their path. The news helicopters above me captured this sight, as I would later learn. I took a deep breath as I ended the technique. Only a few more to go. By the amount of power the creature is building, it's clear that it draws its power from nature energy as well as its own strength, but even a potent source of power like nature energy is not as plentiful as you may like to believe. Besides, it's difficult to control, and that's the opposite of what that creature is doing. By the looks of things, the blast would be quite massive. I formed the cross seal and 6 shadow clones appeared. They each flickered to one of the remaining 6 shards of what was once the USJ. I can't let these villains die like this, even if it would be infinitely easier to protect just this one shard. I formed another set of seals along with my clones. Earth style, Earth barrier, we called out at once. Alongside the rim of each of our shards, great walls of stone rose from the ground to stand against whatever force their maker intended, but I knew this would not be enough to weather this storm. That was why my clones and I stood outside the walls. Each of us withdrew 7 sealing talismans from our pouches. As the creature reached its critical point, we threw the seals in the air and focused our chakra. Arch-OAS, we roared as one. Shimmering blue Fuinjutsu circles spun to life around the talismans, connecting the 7 to the 1 in the middle. Once again the 7-layered golden barrier sprung to life as the creature detonated. The shockwave was enough to shatter the glass of the main building at UA and do the same for a good number of buildings in the adjacent town. After that came the omnidirectional energy burst that crashed against the 7 shields with 7 layers. A portion of that energy shot into the sky as some sort of twisted beacon to all to bear witness, a twisted monument to this battle. I could feel my reserves drain as I struggled to maintain all 7 shields by myself by means of the chakra transferal between myself and my shadow clones. The first layer broke and I lost concentration for a bit, skidding back until my back was firmly pressed against the wall. Soon after the second layer broke and with it went the wall my back was pressed against. As I did the first time, I reinforced my feet and stuck myself to the ground with chakra. As soon as I did that, the third layer broke. Whatever that thing did to itself to get this much power was clearly a one-trick pony, and it wouldn't have been that bad if it wasn't a constant stream of energy that was bombarding my shields. It takes a lot more chakra to constantly reinforce the whole area of the shield as opposed to a single spot of less surface. This was barely going on for 30 seconds and I already burned through half of my remaining chakra. The fourth layer broke and then the pulse happened, shattering the ground I stood upon by the force it exerted on myself. This in the process broke the fifth layer, and with my chakra reserves dwindling I couldn't reinforce the sixth quite enough and it broke as well. I was left with a single barrier between myself, the kids, the other villains and the self-destructing creature. Just as cracks were beginning to form on the seventh and final layer, the energy stopped. I looked up and saw a charred corpse standing on a solitary pillar of earth a good 50 meters in front of me. Almost as soon as I saw it, it crumbled like dust along with the pillar it was standing on. I dispelled the barrier and my clones and staggered backwards from the feedback I received. I remained standing. Even if I have barely a tenth of my original reserve, I cannot allow myself to show any kind of weakness. I looked me at the crater where the central fountain of USJ used to be. The war has just begun, all for one, and I don't intend to lose. Fuinjutsu barrier style, Rho AIAs, the golden shield with 7 layers said to have an equal defensive power to that of the triple Rashomon. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.